Hey everyone, Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch President here with a special Judicial Watch report on the voter fraud scandal exposed by our friends at Project Veritas. We are honored to be joined by Project Veritas's intrepid leader, entrepreneurial leader, James O'Keefe. Thank you for joining us, James.
Thanks, Tom, for having me on.
So, by now, many of our viewers may know about the big story that you uncovered strong evidence of ballot harvesting, voter fraud, cash for votes, all sorts of illegalities in Minnesota tied to the Ilhan Omar political operation. What brought you into Minnesota? What can you tell us about what you learned that made you think that, hey, we need to send a team there to figure out what's going on?
Well, Tom, you and I have known each other for now 8-9 years, and everyone says that the voter fraud is happening. You hear it at conferences, you hear it from tipsters and your supporters and the people in the country. Everyone always says that we've heard a situation where, or we see documents, but in a world where people don't believe what they hear or see, and circumstantial evidence and hearsay evidence is not enough to convince people, we were trying to find actual hard evidence, incontrovertible video evidence. So we have this insider program, and one of these Somalian individual living in Minneapolis, this is Ward 6, downtown Minneapolis, something called the Horn Towers and Riverside apartment community. These are sort of apartment houses, wore one of these hidden cameras that we gave him and recorded everything. And frankly, is afraid for their life right now for doing this. And a bunch of them were recorded ballot harvesters on the tape. So we just wanted to prove what we've known all along. The director of the FBI last week says does not happen. It's ironic that a director of a federal bureau of investigation says fraud doesn't happen, but that's another story. And we decided that we wanted to catch it on tape. There's a federal felony on the video camera there in Minneapolis, and it shows a systemic voter fraud operation. It's not hearsay, it is on tape.
So let's take a break here so our viewers can look at it.
Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. Wajida gaarigaygu waa buuxaa. Waxaas waa absent ballot salka yaala. Soo ma jeedin. Fiiri, waxaas oo dhan soo ma jeedin. Waa buuxaa gaarigaygu. Waa buuxa yaala.
So what's shocking about that video, James, is how proud that man seems about his conduct. It struck me two things. A, it was wildly illegal or suggested illegal activity. And B, it was nothing new.
Yeah, this was filmed in over the summer, and he not only is this man's name is Liban Mohammed. He's a brother of a city councilman, Jamal Osman, and they are both tied to Ilhan Omar in the community. And in Minnesota, you're not allowed to have in your possession more than 3 ballots. He's got 300, and if you watch the video, he's bragging. It's almost like a South Park episode. Just if you were to script what it would be like. Hundreds of ballots flowing over the dashboard, flowing over the windowsill, flowing on the seat. And he also posted a video. How do we get this video? It was shot privately. He incriminated himself, and the source was able to obtain that video and give it to us. And the legislature in Minnesota made it so that it's illegal. It's a state crime. But Tom, it's more than that. Many of those ballots were blank. The guy told us they were blank. So they were going around to the apartment houses. They were going in the parking lots outside of the polling locations and just taking ballots from people. And a lot of these people they take the ballots from have no choice. They are coerced into doing this. They are paid, and you're not allowed to do anything about it. This is an open secret there in Minneapolis. Nobody has done anything about it. Tom, I called the county prosecutor in that county in Minnesota, and they said it was illegal. But then they sort of passed us to the sheriff's office. It's kind of this hot potato where no one actually wants to enforce the law. And if they don't enforce this, I don't know if anyone's going to enforce any law.
I've often said that voter fraud is a civil rights issue of our time. And we kind of see that there. And your story about the background is shocking because it confirms that the immigrant community in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, is being victimized by this scheme.
Yes.
I mean, you may see, and we'll take a break and watch the money change hands. This is just extraordinary. And I guess it's mostly in Somalian. So you've got a closed caption. But we'll come back, we'll show that.
Yes, Raffman Fisnika, بس بدون هاي ورشيدة والنبض halka aan soo shaqeyno ama hal kala ID number lagu qoraa ama afar division soo shaqeyso lagu qoraa taas dad waasaysa dadka kale ويشون أو هيك بس سبعة مسافرين للسبعة ها هذا ممتاز شاهد أيه يقول يشون أو كوكي بس واحد كذا شيء أيوة.
So what we see there is an actual transaction take place.
Yes.
And to me, it's not clear it's a voluntary transaction. You may see money changing hands, but as you point out, look, they don't have a choice. It's either they take it from them forcefully or they take the money. Is that right?
Yes. It's not voluntary according to what we've seen. One of these ballot harvesters was saying, you are told to vote for Ilhan. He's speaking in Somali. We've translated it to English. Another one saying that they don't care about the Somali community. In some cases, Tom, they actually bring them into the polls and they vote for them. They line them up inside the polls. So we were able to obtain what you just saw. This transaction, this is a federal felony. I think it's USC 10307. It is a federal crime to pay for someone's vote. You can't do that. And then the New York Times and all these people in the world are going to say, well, you don't have any evidence. That's what they always say, you don't have evidence. Tom, that is an actual videotape of a transaction on the tape. And that's the first time anyone's ever seen that before. And you can actually see the currency, the $200 per vote is what we've been told. And there it is, $200 per vote. Some were paid as much as $800 per vote. And that money was coming from the campaign, the political campaigns, including this Jamal Osman character and Ilhan Omar.
Let's take a break because I think we have audio of that. So I want to take a break and listen to that audio.
The money was brought by Ali Gainey. Ali Gainey is the campaign chair of Ilhan. He's a staffer in her office.
Ali
Gainey was coordinating everything.
So what you hear there sounds to me like Ilhan Omar is in on it, or her campaign operation. Can you talk a little bit more about this? Because if I'm Ilhan Omar, I'm like, look, I got a campaign. There are party officials involved in the campaign. All sorts of people come in and out of the campaign. And just because this is going on, it doesn't mean I know about it or approve of it.
Well, her deputy campaign,
with the evidence you have.
Well, her deputy campaign person, guy by the name of Ali Issei Gainey, is on the tape. So he is a federal worker insofar as he's the chair of her campaign, the deputy campaign guy there. So insofar as if my chief of operations for Project Veritas is involved in an illegal federal felony, I have to be, I'm responsible for that insofar as I'm the CEO of Project Veritas. So if Omar's person, Ali Gainey there in the tape, where the money is coming from, she has to respond to this. I mean, it's truly extraordinary that you have, I'm just going to say it again. You have a cash transfer on the video camera and there hasn't been any response from law enforcement. If that doesn't force law enforcement to respond, I don't know what will. I don't know what evidence the media and the FBI actually think is actual evidence. Maybe someone can answer that question for me because I just can't figure it out.
So is the U.S. attorney in Minnesota contacted you? Or
No. I know the president of the United States has asked the U.S. attorneys to investigate this. I've heard from sources that
he's only the president, James. They don't listen to the president.
And Christopher Wray said last week that there's no evidence. I was speaking with some people who suggested maybe get the FBI involved in this as I was doing it. But the reason why I chose not to partner, if you will, with the FBI is because their leader says there's no evidence of voter fraud. So why would I partner with an organization where their core values or leaders suggest that what I'm documenting doesn't exist? Right. But I do think there's good people there, and I do think the Attorney General of the United States seems like his heart is in the right place. And I would hope, Tom, that this week, this ballot harvester you saw on the tape is arrested.
So in Minnesota, as best I could tell, I looked up the regulations on the Secretary of State's website before just yesterday. They've waived the signature requirement witness requirement for mail-in ballots. Plus, they're going to be counting ballots as far as 7 days, as late as 7 days after the election, meaning if the ballot gets there as late as 7 days after election, they're going to count it. It seems to me like they're Ilhan Omar, to a degree, or anyone who wants to cheat, has a easier way of doing it now, thanks to the changes in regulations by the left there in Minnesota.
Yeah, and this law, Tom, the Minnesota criminal statute, the legislative statute that makes it illegal to possess more than 3 ballots. You've heard a lot of people say, well, that law, the guy in the car, was he really breaking the law? Because the law was, it turned out the Minnesota trial court that ultimately put it on hold did not overturn that statute. It merely temporarily restrained the Secretary of State from enforcing it. Therefore, the actions of Ilhan on the tape there in the car with the 300 ballots, just him possessing more than 3 ballots is against state law. So I don't know what more we can do here to show the ballots, to show them in possession of the ballots. I think what's going on is the powers that be know that if they arrest people, it's going to make its way into the New York Times, it's going to make its way into CNN, and they don't want that narrative challenged. They know the consequences of enforcing the law. It becomes newsworthy. And
Right.
The New York Times did a story yesterday, you probably saw this, where they attacked my credibility. They said it's a, quote, disinformation video. Now, you read the New York Times article and you say, what's the disinformation? Follow the logic. The New York Times says it's disinformation because I embargoed the video ahead of time with social media influencers, like Don Trump Jr. or Benny Johnson, right, or media outlets.
Because they never embargo news stories, right?
Never embargo news stories with anyone. So it's absurd, and my lawyers are currently sending a retraction demand letter to the New York Times. So, Tom, we're kind of up against the whole system here, the Bureau of Investigation, the media complex. But I believe that the way to move forward, the way to actually change things, is to get more of these videotapes through whistleblowers. We can't get undercover without people close to the campaigns and on the inside reaching out to us, and they can do that through a portal, Veritas tips at protonmail.com. Veritas tips at protonmail.com. We'll give you the camera. We'll protect you. The people that did film in the Somali community up there in Minneapolis currently fears for their lives. We've had to sort of hire private security, hotel rooms, and we're doing everything we can to protect them. But they're heroes, and they are victims of what the Ilhan Omar campaign up there is doing to them.
I testified to Congress, I guess, back in April on this issue. And I cited, and it's well known out there, you've probably seen it by now, the Baker-Carter Commission, which was a big report several years ago about the dangers of mail-in ballot fraud, absentee ballot fraud, how there's an increased risk of voter fraud. And they were specific. And they said vote buying schemes are harder to detect because you're mailing the ballots out. And in the case of Minnesota, it's being done, in my view, in an irresponsible manner that obviously, as we've warned about, will lead to ballots easily being collected and harvested, not in an honest way, but in a dishonest way. I mean, in my view, this has kind of confirmed the dangers of mailing, by my count, 51 million ballots to people who haven't asked for them, 44 million ballot applications to people who haven't asked for them. When does the next flood of ballots or ballot applications go out to Minnesota? Are they out there now?
That was on September 19th, Friday, September 19th. The general election ballots were mailed, and if you look at that video, the cash transfer video where the guy gives $200 for the form, that was filmed on September 25th or so. So just after those ballots came, that's a general election ballot. Right. Just after those ballots came, you saw the harvesting occur. And to your point, 50 million ballots are going out. The challenge for us is that we're challenging a power structure that says this can't occur and doesn't occur. We're not even talking about how much it occurs. They're saying it doesn't occur. There is no evidence of fraud. So these videos are so manifestly damning because they show not just systemic voter fraud nationally, but systemic voter fraud in one ward, in one city, in one battleground state. Hundreds of ballots in one day, cash transactions, ballot harvesters speaking in Somali. I was told to vote for this candidate or else. So that is systemic. That is systemic. I don't have the authority. I'm not a member of law enforcement, nor do I want to be. People always ask me, and I'm sure they ask you, Tom, why isn't anybody doing anything about it? My solution to that problem is to get more evidence and build a groundswell. On Twitter, these videos have amassed some 15, 20 million views. It broke every record of any video I've ever produced. And I think people are hungry for information that is you can actually see the smoking gun on the tape. And if the New York Times wants to attack me, I will sue them for defamation. I've never lost a defamation lawsuit. If that's what it's going to take, that's what we will do. But we must get more video evidence out in October and November when these 50 million mail-in ballots go out.
So have you cramped the style of the Omar campaign? Do you think it's stopped, at least temporarily, the illegal activity you seemingly have uncovered?
Good question. Good question. This Liban Muhammad character, the guy in the car, actually still posts Snapchat videos. That's what he does. And when one of the videos, he's bragging on his Twitter, actually, he says, "I'm famous." This guy is saying, "I'm famous," and he says hashtag Black Lives Matter. So there appears to be they're heedless. They're so conceited. They know that nobody's going to hold them accountable, especially in that city where all of the sheriff's office, the county prosecutor have no interest in enforcing. Do I think it'll make people scared? Right now, what I'm hearing on the ground is that people are upset about the so-called snitches that filmed this than they are with the exposing of the corruption. But yes, they are going to be deterred, obviously, if the person next to them has a camera. Omar's response to the first video, she did respond, and she just laughed it off, Tom, on Monday morning. But the second video came out showing the cash transfer. She was a little more muted. She didn't have anything to say about that. That was something that's hard to contest and hard to argue with.
So, James, I want to ask you a little bit about this Ilhan Omar. I mean, you've mentioned now 3 or 4 times folks fearing violence. You know, we've complained about the ethics issues related to her possibly engaging in marriage fraud, IRS fraud, campaign finance fraud, etc. And, you know, in those stories, there were concerns that people had about their personal safety as a result of coming forward. And you're providing more information about that. But, you know, listening to some of that audio, it sounds like it's not even, it's maybe even I guess, a foreign terrorist organization linked potentially. And I don't know what, other than what's in the video, but it sure ought to be concerning, maybe to Director Wray and others.
Yeah, this is the part of the video. I'm going to read the quote here. It says, "We don't mind if it's illegal," unquote. That's a pretty shocking statement by the ballot harvester, a guy named Gainey. And he says the ballot harvester connects Al-Qaeda. This is the affiliate Al-Shabaab, which has connections to Al-Qaeda. Osman Ali Dakhani, he's the guy in this tape who says, "We don't care that it's illegal." He has no fear of his actions, so much so that he casually mentions he has to pay off, this is crazy, but it's in the tape, Al-Qaeda to open up a business back home in Mogadishu. And he does not know that he's being recorded saying these things. And the money he has to send to Al-Shabaab as part of the process. He says, "I sent it from my account last night, $2,000. Again, he's speaking in Somali. This is translated into English. "Here is the receipt. I'm requesting a license to be issued at the Ministry of Interior. Cost me $2,000. So this is how they do business overseas. These are people in Minneapolis, ballot harvesters, bragging about how they're doing business overseas. So, I mean, and this is real. This is not a setup. I didn't stage this. This is not someone who works for me. This is a source in Minneapolis recording this guy, and his name, again, his name is, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, Osman Ali Dakhani, and it's subtitled in the video. So again, Mr. Wray, I know that you probably hate my guts because we're exposing something that you said last week can't happen. And I understand if you're a prideful individual, then you're more concerned with how you look rather than doing your job. But you should look into this, Mr. Wray. And if you don't look into this, I would question, what is it exactly that you do there at the FBI? And it's a shame, it's a tragedy that Project Veritas has to do the work that the FBI, I guess, refuses to do. And I'm not trying to make a generalization, but Where are the arrests? When are you going to make a statement? I just don't understand it. The FBI has targeted me in the past. They recently put me on an NICS watch list and wouldn't let me buy a gun. And that, by the way, was changed, Tom, last month. They took me off that list after I sued them. You guys at Judicial Watch were very helpful. Thank you very much for your FOIA requests. We were successful. So this is the tragedy, and I think the hope is that as far as the overseas connections and the illegal cash transfers, my hope is that today, tomorrow, in the coming days, Bill Barr does something. I hope that is what occurs.
Well, my concern is that you've just touched the tip of the iceberg here. Here you highlighted the corruption targeting one immigrant community, harming the voting rights of those who have a right to vote and have right not to have their vote essentially negated by illegal votes. Have you gotten, I know you can't say too much, have you gotten similar similar tips about other cities?
Yeah, we've been inundated this week with hundreds of tips, and many of them very, very legitimate. And the most important ones are actual people who have some access to a campaign or to a polling location or to a vehicle that has ballots in it. Because it's not enough, Tom, to just get people bragging or gloating about the act. You have to actually catch them in the act. And that's what we're looking for. Judicial Watch is, in my opinion, the most effective organization in Washington, D.C. And Project Veritas is perhaps the only organization that does the undercover video, getting the actual smoking gun. So if you're watching this broadcast and you're saying, what can I do? That's the question everyone always asks me. What can I do? What can I do? Well, what you can do is, in the next 45 days, if you see something and you need help, I'm sure you can call Tom. But if you need equipment or a camera or legal advice, just to record, contact us. Again, it's Veritas Tips, Veritas Tips at protonmail.com, and we'll get in there and record it.
Yeah, I remember, your mentor, the late Andrew Breitbart, and he was talking about you. And I don't think you were there when he was talking about you. And he said, and he was talking to a bunch of conservatives, much older than you are or were. And he said, you guys would never do what James does. You're too afraid. You just would never allow him to do it. And it's people like you doing it on your own, as I called you, entrepreneurial. Because this is something that the movement generally, and as you point out, the FBI doesn't even want to do, even though it's hiding in plain sight. And it's not like it's rocket science. I mean, this is a tried and true investigative technique. We all watched it on TV when we were kids.
Yeah.
And,
maybe while I was born in the 80s, Mike Wallace, I was born in 84, so 60 Minutes used to do this sort of thing, I suppose, not as like this with the internet technology and cameras that are little. But Tom, you touched upon a very important point, and I've thought about this a lot. Why does the so-called conservative movement or any media, why don't they do this? And I think it's because, number one, they fear the terrifying and humiliating power of the press. And I think people want to go along to get along. They don't want to make changes. They don't want to upset the apple cart. And especially in Washington, D.C. So I think you need people on the outside to make the changes. You need citizens, brave insiders, brave whistleblowers, people close to the scene of the crime. And you need to build what is called a groundswell on social media to force the powers that be.
Well, so when I first saw this, I thought the first action by local law enforcement would be to target you. Have they started targeting you yet?
Not yet. I
don't want to give them any ideas.
I mean, listen, they've done that before, right? I've been to federal. I've been through everything you can imagine. I've been to federal court. I've been in jail. I've been falsely accused, and I think they risk that, Tom, because I think if they do that, they're going to lose. We have like 15 lawyers now, and I've learned in my life that the only way to lose is if you give them an inch. I will not. I've broken no law. I have violated no non-disclosure agreement. I'm not ashamed of anything. I don't plead the fifth. I hide from nothing. I run from nothing. And if they come after me with any criminal subpoenas or any arrests, I will fight them, and I will eventually win, if not at trial, in an appellate court. And that's just what you got to do. You can't compromise or settle on your principles. You have to stand firm. You have to be a beacon for these whistleblowers. That's the most important thing.
Well, I really commend your work, and it highlights the fact that conservatives, or at least those conservatives concerned about combating voter fraud and exposing it, are actually the ones defending minority communities, defending the dispossessed, defending the ones targeted by the radical left who think they can treat them like garbage in order to take and steal and manage their votes. And we're the ones on the side, frankly, of Democratic voters who are trying to get their votes protected and counted. And that's maybe some of the reason that the establishment doesn't want to do it, because too many Republicans don't care about this issue, because if it's not their voters, they don't care about it. Only if their candidates lose over it. So your principled position, A, is patriotic and nonpartisan, and it's one we share quite strongly with you. So, James, good luck to you. As you know, we're ready to help in any reasonable way we can. And, we've got to save our elections. They're under assault in a way never seen before in modern American history. And I think you've contributed mightily to doing so.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for having me on today.
You're welcome.